Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to the Gang of Three. That's us. We are here. The gang's all here. 7:15 on a Monday. Let's talk about what happened this last weekend in Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pete, how you doing, man?
I am. We're here, so let's go with that. Look, not a fun Monday by any stretch.
No, it certainly is not. Take it, Lane. You probably are not still reveling in whatever that was we saw yesterday.
Same as it ever was.
Same as it ever was, my friend. Same as it ever was. Listen, if you are watching on YouTube or Twitch, feel free to jump into the chat room, ask us some questions or make some pointed comments or whatever to get my attention. And we will certainly respond to them as we have time throughout the program. But we got a lot to talk about tonight. Guys, I'm going to lead off with a story I read this morning from Jason Lloyd. And Jason Lloyd's opinion is that the Cleveland Browns season was never about winning, and that the team is showing that by things like the Newsome trade, which was made toward the end of the week, and then putting Tyson Campbell in the lineup. And that's just not the type of thing you do if you're looking to win. Lane, let's start with you tonight. Does that take make sense to you?
Well, what do you call winning? We've talked about this since the preseason, heading into the beginning of the season. This year is about progress and development, and being competitive and trying to win doesn't necessarily mean that 6 weeks into the season now all of a sudden they don't want to win anymore because they're going to trade people. That's a horseshit kind of take. Everybody knew what this was to start with, and it should be no surprise to anybody. You have so much youth and inexperience riddled within this roster that you have to build something so you can show some kind of progress. And you only get progress if you develop what you have. And it's a hard thing to swallow because fans want to win. And it's very understandable, the frustration and people being pissed off and every kind of notion on what they're doing. Because now they're 1-5, everybody sucks in Cleveland now. And while I wouldn't say that's necessarily the truth, there are definitely some issues that they got to resolve, because if you look at the Cleveland Browns over the last, 24 games or 28 games, whatever we want to say, there's only been one period that was really worse than this in recent history that people can really wrap their hands around, and that was Hugh Jackson. At least Hugh Jackson's team could score. This team is just so freaking inept. They can't even line up correctly.
Yeah, they're really struggling. Pete, do you think that the trade show the priority of the team is focused on the future and not the right now? It seems clear to me that their focus is 2026, 2027.
No, I think there's a fundamental disconnect on what the Browns are trying to do. Tyson Campbell is a good player right now. Tyson Campbell showing up on Thursday is a really tough ask. And honestly, considering the circumstances, I think he played well for himself. Like, you didn't trade for that to think about the future, because Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski aren't guaranteed 2026 by any stretch. So it works against their own interest in that sense. In the same way that, why would you trade for Cam Robinson if your concern is simply about the future and give up picks for that? And trading Joe Flacco certainly isn't about anything other than, Mike Tomlin can say what he wants. The Browns saw an opportunity to do right by Joe Flacco and get something for it, because there was a non-zero chance at some point, not soon, but at some point they might end up flat out cutting him simply because of roster space. Because if they do get into a situation where they eventually have to activate Deshaun Watson, they're not going to just keep 4 quarterbacks just to do it. So at some point, the rubber was going to meet the road on this thing. So the Browns saw a situation to get a player that was going to benefit them. What I would add to this is, when we went to this season, we saw the schedule rolled out. everybody saw those first 6 games, and a lot of people said this team could easily be 1-5. Well, surprise, surprise, they're 1-5, and now everyone wants to change their mind as far as what that means for this team. And look, I totally understand. It's incredibly frustrating to watch, particularly this offense. And we're now at a point where we're having to nitpick what is still a very good defense because it hasn't been as stellar the past 2 weeks because the offense is so bad. But the one part I will agree with on Jason Lloyd, it's not necessarily about you. It is about where is this group of – we're up to, by the way, 13 rookies who have played at this point for this team so far. And you know it's at least going to be 14 because at some point Shador is going to get in there. They were already up to 13, which is almost 25% of your roster. It's not about what this team is going to be at week 6. It's what this team's going to be about week 16 and if this team's going to get better. What I would caution the Browns and Kevin Stefanski is you need to have a very good week. You have to have a great week because we can talk about how the Browns were facing off against 6 teams that had 10 wins last year and a whole bunch of teams that were either projected to finish potentially in the Super Bowl, in the championship, or at the top of their division. The team that's not is the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are a 1-5 football team. This is where the pressure starts to go, and you can't defend it if you come out and score 9 against the Miami Dolphins, or if you come out in a couple weeks after the bye and you score 10 against the New York Jets. You can get away with sort of struggling against the Pittsburgh Steelers off a bye week and who look great and who in some ways gone all in on this season, acquiring guys like Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Ramsey, so on and so forth. The Miami Dolphins are what the Miami Dolphins are actually going through. They look like an actual mess. This is what many Browns fans think the Browns actually are. So if you go and lose to a team like that, I think the conversation gets a far more legitimate in terms of this is not working. But if they go out and win this week and we start, I would say if you can go out and win 2 of the next 3, which I think is incredibly realistic, then things will calm down a little bit. More than anything, this locker room needs a morale boost. These rookies need to see something working and getting that part going.
Yeah.
And also what goes along with that is that they've went through the deep water now. You're 6 weeks in. Now they've got some shallow water to play in. If this team doesn't show any progress over these next 3 weeks, starting with Miami, anybody who says that Stefanski and Andrew Berry are safe, that narrative is going to start changing if it hasn't already been in the mind of the guy who owns this team, because the Browns have been embarrassing for the most part. You can't keep talking this talk and not showing those steps that go with it. So now you got Miami coming up and you got the Jets. You got games that you can win. If this team shows the complete inept style of play and unimaginative play calling and issues that evolve into not being able to run the football or not being able to protect the quarterback or receivers running wrong routes and dropping balls and having your rookie quarterback and the stat sheet showed that he threw the ball 52 times, which is unfathomable for a rookie playing his second game. Those changes have to start showing up now because there's no more excuses. There's no more, well, we're playing to get better and we got to do better. You've heard that horse shit now for a year and a half. Okay, so let's get down to it. You've got all this influx of young talent that you have to coach up. Some of these guys have been fantastic. Some of these times they show that they are rookies, and you're going to get that. But you got to have that climb up that mountain with these guys to continue that. Everything else associated is a big question mark with this team. You have the same penalties, procedure penalties, all kind of garbage like that you've had since the preseason, now 6 weeks in. Those are inexcusable penalties that have to stop at some point. So either these guys are not being coached up well enough, they lack focus. There's a disconnect in what's getting to that team onto the field and trying to line up as simple as it can be. You have a job. Yeah. It's the same thing against Pittsburgh with the defensive line just annihilating this Browns offensive line, a veteran offensive line, to say that. It wasn't just on the tackles. It was inside. Junkins would get a handoff, and he was already shouldered by the time he got to the line of scrimmage. There was nowhere to run. Pittsburgh played, too deep, at least a third of the time. I didn't count the plays, but it had to have been. Thing is that they had no respect for what Cleveland was going to do in the passing game. Really didn't give a shit less, and it showed on that field. And there was no way to react and compound off of what Pittsburgh was doing because they couldn't even get themselves in the simplistic state of running a series without some kind of issue.
Yeah, Pete, you're absolutely right in terms of people analyzing this. I remember Fred and I on the OBR Weekly show going through the schedule and saying, yeah, 2-4, 1-5, it's a realistic expectation. And now that we're here, everybody's freaking out. But I think some of it has to do with the watchability of that offense. It is just Pittsburgh gets 10 points ahead and you just think it's over. That looks like 100 points, to a normal football team. I guess the question is, as, stated here in the chat room from our buddy Brian Kay, that 52 passes is an absolute coaching malpractice. To what degree do you think that Stefanski had a choice about whether to throw 52 times? Do you think he was forced into that by the lack of the effective run? Or do you think it's just, the only way he thought that this team could move down the field?
It was definitely the latter. The Steelers absolutely dominated the line of scrimmage from start to finish. It absolutely destroyed them. Glenn already mentioned it. Judkins had nowhere to go. Like in the previous games, you could see where there's holes, and usually Judkins is good enough to see them. There was nothing. He was literally just trying to battering ram his way north and south and getting nowhere. Meanwhile, the Steelers oftentimes were sitting back with two safeties just watching. They put an extra tackle on the field. They put multiple tight ends in and tried to do it that way. They weren't moving the ball. So at some point, you're a fool for doing this. I think the play that just ended it for me was in the fourth quarter when the Steelers were in a soft zone, just trying to salt away the clock. And the Browns have 1st and 10. They hand the ball off. Judkins gets 1 freaking yard. And so what else do you have to do? I mean, look, to the Steelers' credit, they had a great game plan. They executed it. They took Mike Tomlin went into that game and said, Quinshon Judkins is not going to beat us. And he was right. He did. He took it away. So at that point, you're now putting in the hand quarterback against a very veteran secondary with a bunch of young receivers. And the Pittsburgh Steelers bet rightly that the Browns could not get down the field without making mistakes. And the shame of it was, as much as Kevin Stefanski has to own, certain aspects of this loss, there were plays that were wide open that could have been big plays or touchdowns. They left multiple touchdowns on the field. The first series of the game, David Njoku is wide open running a post route, uncovered when they shifted to empty. As much as I hate empty, it was there. Part of it was they couldn't protect him. Dylan Gabriel sort of threw a limp pass to nothing because he couldn't slide right and make the throw. The problem isn't, I don't really blame play calling so much. What I end up blaming, though, is, and what's going to ultimately fall on Kevin Stefanski, is they are making a bet. They are betting on their ability and these young players that they've drafted, which is a talented draft class, to be able to figure it out fast enough to transition this thing where it's supposed to hit the accelerator and start getting easier now. And it would be a little bit more, tolerable had the Browns gotten a big defensive stop against the Minnesota Vikings and won that game, or come away with the victory against the Cincinnati Bengals. And maybe this thing's a little bit easier. But I would say this, even if the Browns were miraculously 3-3, they would still, I still think ownership would be grading this on the curve of what are you doing to get this team in position to compete, not just worry about the standings, even if they would sort of be in a better spot from that standpoint. The offense would still be what it is. That part has to get better.
Yeah, Lane, on the running game, you and I and Pete are old enough to remember when Butch Davis said, hey, we stopped Jamal Lewis except for 2 different runs or 3 different runs where he ran over 90 yards, right? Mm-hmm. You keep running Judkins into that line. They tried it a number of times. It obviously wasn't working. Do you keep doing that, hoping that he breaks one, or is that just futility?
Well, it proved in the limited amount of carries that they have, it was futile. And they didn't attempt to keep pushing that run game. They tried to get wide a couple times, limited success. There was nothing inside. They're bringing in extra tight ends and linemen trying to block, and they couldn't block. The only problem is that when you put a rookie quarterback in his second start under that enormous pressure that Pittsburgh was bringing in the looks, and then you got a couple safeties just sitting back, in la-la land, waiting to see what happens, because they didn't feel any threat, none, of the Browns being able to go over the top. They knew everything that they've seen on film, watching this offense with Dillon Gabriel under center, going back to the preseason and into his first start and how this game started. Everything was underneath. You can say he threw 52 passes. You can also say that how many of those passes were 10 yards in the air?
Mm-hmm.
There's just absolutely no threat of them being able to beat you. And it was easy enough for them to play everything, keep everything in front that they were going to do, and just stop the run. Stop everything associated coming out of that backfield. And they did it as well as you can do it. And the Browns, even though they tried adjustments to offset some of that, it didn't do anything. It was a bad performance, a performance that this offensive line definitely showed that they're just not capable at this time to play against that physicality or that duress, especially with a rookie quarterback under center with a limited number of snaps, knowing that they're not going to get the ball over the top on you. And they didn't even try. And that's the most disappointing aspect of all this. You can say that on 43 of Dillon Gabriel's 52 statistical attempts, they had under 2.5 seconds to throw the ball. Okay, you can say that. That doesn't exclude you from getting back and throwing the ball downfield at some point to at least show the defense that they're either capable, not afraid to, will take the shot. It at least makes them aware that this can happen. They played that game with reckless abandon, the Steelers did defensively. They didn't give a shit. They were going to stop Judkins, stop the run game, stop everything within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage. And if the Browns miraculously got the ball 12 yards downfield, okay, they'll live with it and line up again on first down. Pittsburgh didn't care, and that showed. And it's a disappointing thing because this team, up to this point, is just simply incapable of fending that kind of pressure.
And the reason for that, Pete, is what? Is it inadequate protection on the offensive line? Is it receivers who can't get separation? Is it a lack of will? What is it that's keeping the Browns from really showing the opponents that they can at least attempt to stretch the field?
I mean, it's a combination of factors. They can't protect. I mean, the Browns, they went max protect at one point and got nowhere because they don't have a receiver good enough to sort of threaten in that scenario to win downfield or to create space. So max protect doesn't really do you any good. And they do some chip and release stuff to try to protect, but ultimately the Browns end up being better off just sending as many receivers out into the combination as possible, because if they don't have guys that are necessarily going to dominate and create separation, get open and consistently catch the ball, they're going to try to do it with numbers and try to get the ball out on time. Either one of those, even when the Browns chipped, they had some issues. Like they tried to roll out Dillon Gabriel early in the game. Unfortunately, Harold Fannin went to the wrong guy. Went inside when he should have gone outside, and the kind of things where the execution and their sort of lack of awareness and rookies who look like rookies is hurting them. But to Lane's point, at some point they do have to sort of rear back and fire the damn thing and see if it's not going to create a situation. We saw it with Joe Flacco a little bit in his last start, trying to get the ball down the field to Isaiah Bond. Jerry Jeudy's certainly a guy that can create in that capacity. But, the other part of this is Dillon Gabriel's willpower. At times he's dropping his eyes a little bit and he's more worried about what's going on. And I can't blame him too much because the pocket's collapsing so fast, it becomes really difficult. So the combination of factors makes it really difficult to do these things because when Nick Herbig is back in the backfield before Dylan Gabriel even gets to the top of his drop, it just limits what you can achieve. So this is the problem they're running into. It's never one thing, but even when they get, say, 2 of the 3 things right, the third thing seems to let them down too often.
Lane, interesting comment here from Dennis. He says Browns are so easy to defend, but he also made the point that, last year Winston was spraying the ball all over the field. Get 500 yards to our receivers, probably 200 yards to the defenders. I don't know. But he was spraying the ball all over the place, and we were gaining yards. We were putting together some offense from time to time.
Mhm.
Is Dylan Gabriel the difference, or is it the offensive line has weakened with another year of age, or what is it? Why the difference from last year to this year?
Well, let's put it this way. The offensive line has basically been mediocre, would be casting them in a favorable light. They have not played well. And when you're getting killed at tackle, it just exasperates everything, because you can get somewhat of a pocket to step into, but the pocket is still being pushed back, and you're getting crashed at tackle. Here's the difference, and this is what got Jameis Winston in a deep shit with the Browns last year with the head coach. Jameis Winston got to the point he didn't care. If he saw it, he was doing it. That was his mentality, and that's how he plays the game. He would drop back. If he saw an opportunity or a chance to put the ball on a receiver to make a play, he did it. Winston was a ballsy quarterback, but it ended up costing him in the end with it, because then he started turning the ball over like crazy. Created the problem with the head coach where they had him sitting him down. The difference is that these quarterbacks right now in this offense are being coached up to the maximum to minimize mistakes. Don't turn the ball over. Don't throw it in traffic. Don't take a chance. Dump the ball off. This is everything that's getting pounded in these guys' heads. They did it to Flacco. It's happening with Gabriel. And when Shedeur Sanders finds the field, it's going to be the same thing with him. Unless this offense miraculously evolves to the point where they can start doing things correctly, because their execution sucks. You get right down to the bottom line. Their execution is terrible. You can't block. You can't chip. You miss blocks. You miss assignments. You got 2 guys taking one guy away. You got a guy running right up the middle. The execution is horrible, and that's coaching. It comes down to coaching. If you got players on the field that can't be coached up or can't play within what you're doing, then you have to remove the element. You have no choice. Because what happens every Sunday is the same thing. They've lost a couple games they could have won because they just couldn't execute. That's what we've seen through 6 weeks. That's the consistent thing that's happening in Cleveland. They don't execute, and it kills them.
Pete, on that note, Lane points to coaching, which I think is appropriate. Is there an element of it too, which is the fact that we're playing so many rookies? You expect some inconsistency, some Harold Fannin to screw up every once in a while, and as he learns the game. Is that a significant contributing factor, or do you put most of this on the coach or on the players?
No, the amount of rookies they're playing is huge. I mean, there's an old coaching adage, puppies will bite you, and they've done it consistently this year. I think this last game was the most egregious in terms of rookies looking like rookies. Some of that you can credit the bye week. The Steelers are a veteran ball club that looked like a veteran ball club compared to the Browns. They made mistakes, but made far fewer of them. Far more assignment sound. They executed what they wanted to do reasonably well, and that was the difference in the game. And the game wasn't out of reach at any point, but nevertheless, it was a decisive advantage in their favor. But this is the path the Browns have chosen. So that's how they work. And they can't really afford to sort of, if they're replacing rookies who aren't getting the job done, more than likely they're replacing with other rookies. So that's part of the devil's bargain in this whole thing. You went super young, and when you move down the depth chart, it gets younger by and large. So you need a breakthrough. You need to start paying off. And here's the problem with this. Generally speaking, from my experience, this does not happen. Like, everybody wants progress to sort of be a steady improvement. In my experience, it's usually epiphanies that result in leaps, and then stagnation followed by another leap. And the Browns have been stagnating quite a bit. That we've got some good stuff early, and you certainly see flashes, but I think they're in stagnation period, and the Browns desperately need that epiphany to come and that leap to come. And if it does, I think they can take off and be effective. But it's very difficult to plan for it. It's one of those things that just happens. Now, fortunately for the Browns, they've played really tough competition that could function to harden this group and make them better for it. But they have to pay it off and learn from it. And it's not always clear, as illustrated by the ball bouncing off the side of Isaiah Bond's head, that it's always coming through. They don't always have the awareness, and they've got to get better. But this is the hope, is that they've gone through the school of hard knocks. They understood what was going on, and the Browns are desperately hoping and betting that they're going to come through on the other side and figure it out.
I'm kind of getting some very interesting comments here throughout this program. Please keep them coming. Here's one from Kevin Kennedy, Lane, that I'd like you to respond to. He says, it's all about the Watson trade. They haven't invested in the offense for nearly half a decade. The wide receiver 2 is a UDFA who didn't even get into camp until the third preseason. Joke, it's a game. Can play the coach if you want. At what point do we stop giving this front office a mulligan for the Watson trade? Is that next year after they've recouped all these draft picks? Is it now? At what point do we stop presenting the Watson trade as an excuse for the quality of play that we're seeing on the field?
Well, there's a pretty monumental list of Browns draft choices under Andrew Berry. And as some of you may know, I get along well there. But when you look at this list of players that they've selected, and they haven't done anything. I mean, you can say Zach Zinter, third-round pick, hasn't been able to sniff the field. Cam Mitchell, DTR, whatever you think of him. How about Ika? What have you really gotten from Cedric Tillman?
Right.
Darian Winfrey, David Bell, Felton, Tommy Togiai, James Hudson, Anthony Schwartz, Nick Harris, Jacob Phillips. That's just to name a few.
Right.
There's a problem there. Okay. We can all sit here and say that, man, Andrew Berry nailed this sucker. 2025 draft, he nailed it. And it looks like he's going to nail it. The only problem is you got 2024, 23, 22, that you start going, these are guys that should have been core guys on your team. Core players. Hasn't happened. Now we get to Deshaun Watson. The biggest stink bomb ever dropped on the Cleveland Browns. And you wonder why. When does the pass stop? Well, if it would have been Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski making this decision, like it was their decision solely, fine. But it wasn't. Your owner was all up in there because he wanted the flashy new toy who was proven that was a star, was effective, could get it done. Something they missed because they didn't have confidence in Baker. They didn't want to pay him all that money. They knew what they wanted to know about it. So now we go through all these years now without first-round draft choice. Severely hampers your salary cap. You have to continue doing things and pushing that out and creating monies. But when you don't have first-round picks, you're losing the opportunity for the top talent. And that team, this team especially, really needed that. And they've whiffed. So now you face a situation that now you got first-round draft choice and you have two of them coming next year. The opportunity is there now to get that talent. They showed they could draft when they went in the direction that they did. That's something they have to keep going. It's going to be interesting to see what happens out of the rest of this year. Because if this team stinks to join up the next 3 weeks, there's no guarantees for anything. So It's now or never. They have to start producing.
Yeah, comment from Stephen Kramer for you, Pete. He says, I think the whole don't turn the ball over takes the best ability out of the QBs. Did it with Baker and now doing it with these guys. They are so risk averse, and why don't they have explosive plays? Again, do you think that is intrinsic to the coaching staff and Tommy Rees and all of these guys, and it's something that they can never break away from?
I think when it comes to Kevin Stefanski's offense, his mindset has always been sort of take what the defense gives you, and he's largely schemed it in a way that it allows you to do exactly that and be successful. And, you know, get all kinds of revisionist history on Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield has never been better up until this year than he was in 2020. By efficiency standards, dominated that season with
tremendous
Jarvis Landry, Kadarius Hodge, guys that nobody like. People will always give me crap about Jarvis Landry. He was never the player that the Browns needed him to be in that way. Obviously, they got Odell Beckham and he did nothing. But David Njoku was like, not what he is now, but Donovan Peoples-Jones, Baker Mayfield dominated with that group. I mean, you go back. I went back to sort of think about how the Browns might play against the Ravens. And I went back to that, famous shootout with Lamar Jackson, and you just watch what they scheme up in that game. And it's incredible. And it's just taking the profit. Having said that, there's a line that you have to there's a balance you have to find. You don't want guys to make stupid decisions and put the ball into harm's way. But you don't want to also neuter them to the point where they're afraid to do anything. I don't think the Browns are doing that, but they can't afford. They are what they are. They cannot afford to make stupid mistakes. And unfortunately, the plays that are schemed up and are open for them, they're not making. I mean, Dylan Gabriel misses that pass to Jerry Jeudy sitting wide open in the end zone. Those are the plays that just kill you, and that's why you get people in the chat endlessly talking about, well, why don't they go to Shedeur Sanders? Those are the plays that are going to continue to open that door for people, because until he's making those plays and keeping the Browns in games and scoring touchdowns rather than kicking field goals or nothing, then it's going to continue to be a conversation. I don't necessarily look at that way. And look, Dylan Gabriel talks in terms of taking the profit. I think he's absolutely right. But there does come a point when the Browns, to what Lane's talking about in terms of trying to test the defense and trying to be honest to it, find ways to do it. Because even the shots Joe Flacco took weren't high risk shots. It was finding one-on-one coverage and giving your guy a shot. That's fine. The problem I think the Browns have, which I sort of understand and sort of don't understand, is a feeling of, well, we don't feel like we're going to complete this. We do not have the down to give up for those type of shots. And I do think that is a mindset they need to get out of. And some of that comes down to the fact that the Browns just need to find a way to stay on the field. They don't have enough offensive plays in general. And when you are in that scenario, when you are going 3 and out and you're struggling and you're not finding any rhythm, you do end up boxing yourself in and getting way too myopic in terms of your thinking, because you're just desperately trying to find some way to extend the play and not just rear back and chuck the ball downfield in what looks like an obvious prayer. They've got to be able to find some more rhythm in that sense.
Lane, any thoughts as to that? And I've got another example that's being held out as a Stefanski problem, and it was brought up in the television broadcast yesterday, and that is KT Leviston after Jack Conklin was knocked out of the game yet again, not getting a lot of help, and KT Leviston obviously was overwhelmed by the edge rusher and needed some help from a chip block or, whatever had to happen. I guess my question to you, and I rely on you guys to tell me this stuff, is whether that was a coaching decision to leave Leviston on an island, or was it a mistake? Is it a missed assignment? I I don't really understand which of those two it is and where the finger should be pointed.
Well, here, I can give you a couple examples right from the get-go. Levinson at right tackle. Once it came in from Conklin, everybody wants to assume that he didn't get any help. There was
Plenty.
two plays within a 5-play sequence that they had a tight end and a running back that came up and was responsible to chip and blew it. I mean, one was Njoku, and he played Matador. By the time a pass rusher of like Watt, say, come in with a full head of steam and gets by right through the right tackle and your tight end who's supposed to chip. And then there's a running back because you got to keep a running back in because you're a max protect because you can't do anything. So
Right.
when you got a guy that's 270 pounds motoring right by you and he just went right through him. And Dylan Gabriel's running for his life. Make no excuse because he still kind of got the ball off in the flat because there was a standing right there. Doesn't happen. And this is the example when we talk about them not executing. This is what it means. It doesn't mean a penalty. It means just the lack of executing the simplest assignment, the everyday assignment. In that play, you have a job. Njoku is to get a chip and get out in the route. Doesn't happen. Then you're max protecting, and you're bringing an extra lineman in, and you're running backs, and you're keeping them in. So you're taking opportunities of getting that running back out in the play because things are happening too quick up front for that to become a realistic option most of the time. So when I'm talking about them getting vertical, at least trying to get vertical, you can look at X amount of plays that they had an opportunity yesterday to throw the ball downfield. Isaiah Bond broke 3 by 2.5 to 3 yards on at least 2 occasions that I've seen so far, and I haven't even looked through all of it yet. Njoku, same thing, and Jerry Jeudy. This is the difference between the mindset of your head coach and how they're being coached and the pressure of not making mistakes. And when you have a guy back there under center who just is going to get back, sees that one-on-one, that man-to-man, or that opportunity to split a seam, that quarterback is just going to let it rip. And that's what you don't see here. And that's a worrisome thing. Maybe when we see Gabriel with a couple more starts under his belt, more snaps, and maybe some success, we'll start to see more of that. Because when he was at Oregon, he wasn't afraid to throw the ball in the seam or taking that shot. But right now, it's not there. And I believe a lot of that is how they're being coached up because they're so worried about possessions.
Yeah, Pete. So you guys are basically telling me that the coach knew better than to leave a developmental prospect at right tackle on a complete island, and we were perhaps maybe a little bit misled by the analysis of J.J. Watt.
Chip, extra tight end, extra running back, max protect. They did every single thing you could possibly. Because here's the thing, there are trade-offs. When you put more guys in the backfield, the trade-off is you have left guys going out in the route. And right now, I sort of mentioned this earlier, they don't have a guy who's able to, like, you know, when you don't have sort of a Justin Jefferson who's going to beat 2 guys and get open so you can drop everybody back and you can trust that he's going to do it. Jerry Jeudy's certainly talented, but hasn't been wildly inconsistent. And after that, like, who are you going to go to? So, you know, that's part of the problem. So it's a trade-off. So when the Browns get into a situation where they're trying to chip or nothing, if the Browns don't have help on him, the ball is designed to come out quickly. It's almost catch, step, throw. If there's a chip, you've got a little bit more time, or maybe you're rolling the other way, but there's still a sort of limited clock you're working on. When you've got max protect or something along those lines, you've got more time to sort of operate. But there is a disconnect at times. This was really apparent with Joe Flacco, and part of the reason I think he got benched. There was a major disconnect in terms of the timing between Joe Flacco's clock internally and the design of the pass protection. But no, they've tried everything. And at some point, you just get frustrated and say, screw it. I'm going to put more guys out in the route and hope that Dylan Gabriel's, because they're not, if my guys aren't blocking, I'll put more guys out there and hope Dylan Gabriel can sort of make something happen.
Yeah, Gabriel, remember seeing him a few times against Ohio State. He was not afraid to throw the ball downfield. Obviously he doesn't have a lot of time here to let plays develop like he did at Oregon, but definitely can throw the ball more than 15 yards, which has been suggested in the chat a couple of times. Well, let's keep focusing on the offense. One of the things that I'm worried about that I thought I saw yesterday was Judkins maybe not being quite as, after being stoned at the line of scrimmage 10 times, not as vertical, as he normally is, hitting the hole aggressively. Was that a missed spot on my part? Am I seeing things? I'm also thinking that it seemed like some of the drops were created by wide receivers hearing footsteps. That's just my impression. I bring no special knowledge here. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Well, as far as, Judkins, I mean, this comes down to, one, he's a rookie, and two, guys are getting frustrated and want to make something happen. And when you're just running into a brick wall, you're going to try something else. Receivers have a good reason to think they are hearing footsteps, because they are. I mean, I think Dillon Gabriel has some ability, but between the inability to run the football and just the defense the Steelers are playing, where they play a lot of zone and play a lot of too high, it allowed it created situations where Dillon Gabriel threw guys into car wrecks. Two notable ones. Gage Larvadain made the catch he needed to make, and he got absolutely killed for it by Jalen Elliott, helmet to helmet, out on his feet almost immediately. And there was another tight window throw where David Njoku was thrown into a catch, and he's immediately greeted by a shoulder into his thigh and knee. He stayed in the game, but would eventually have to leave with what the team called the new injury, and we don't have an update on that. So they are hearing footsteps. Jerry Jeudy clearly heard footsteps, and this is sort of partly because the Browns aren't consistent, and partly because this is where the Steelers are able to drop back so far and trust that they're just going to be a rally to the football, knowing what's coming. And this comes down to not being able to stay on schedule. That it sets you up for these type of hits. I mean, that's just the way the Steelers play defense. It's a little more difficult against a team that plays more man coverage like the Browns do. They don't have these situations because generally the DBs are back to the ball type thing. But against zone defenses and with the speed NFL defenders have, they close those windows quick. So it may look good in terms of making the completion initially, but the immediate reaction is, man, I hope he's okay. Dillon Gabriel has to be aware of those situations, or he's going to run out of guys to throw the ball to, or they're just going to not go in there. And we've seen that at points where we've had guys sort of gator arm it because they think they're going to get killed. And, on the one hand, you're sitting there going, you got to go catch the football. On the other hand, you saw what happens when you did. So they've got to strike a better balance with that. That's just one of these things, experience, understanding the speed of the game, and just, having your first two starts be the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers is a brutal way to start your career. My hope for Dillon is going to sort of allow him to really jumpstart where he goes from here and hit the ground, again, find one of those epiphanies and really, really get better. But those are concerning situations where, yes, it's a completion, but not what you want to see and not sustainable.
Well, and the other thing too is that you're getting a rookie quarterback with the pressures and everything else that's going on, is that you can't be late getting the ball over the middle or inside the hashes. You've got to get the ball out on time, or you have to recognize it and throw the ball earlier. And that was part of the reason why Njoku went through the meat grinder and Gage got crushed, is because those balls were late. And that's an element in our system of them not being on time, as Pete talked about. That's just another facet of being on time. Late over the middle, especially hashes in, you're wandering in no man's land where you're looking for trouble. You're either getting the ball intercepted or you're getting somebody just mutilated. And that was a tough situation. That's something that Gabriel has to get better at and get the ball out. I mean, you want to see him get into his drop, get to his back foot, and get rid of the ball. When you're standing around looking and you take that second, that's when you start to see things breaking down. And that's what this Browns passing game is really been, if you look at it, is that if you're not getting back and getting it out, and you have to go to read 1, 2, 3, especially with this receiving core and how limited as an offense all this has been, you're in trouble. And he has to get the ball out on time because he's not going to get a lot of help from his receivers at this point.
Right. Yeah, it's a very difficult problem to solve, and a lot of it starts with the offensive tackle position, Pete. It's a mess right now. They've got a couple of guys with experience that are on the practice squad. They got rid of Thayer Munford today. Apparently he's not going to be the answer at offensive tackle. You know, I guess the question goes back to the fact that we picked 2 running backs. We picked 2 quarterbacks in the draft. Was it GM malfeasance not to bolster the offensive line during this draft, specifically the offensive tackle position? Or, you know, is it just a matter of bad luck with Conklin's injury and Jones' injury?
Who do you want?
That was for Pete. I don't know if I'm breaking up or not.
No, this is the absolute right question. This year, you can sort of give the Browns a pass on not specifically addressing offensive tackle this year because at least you can look at all the other picks and go, they're good. I have been clamoring for this for the last several years to do a better job of pre-planning the offensive line progression that you were inevitably going to have to deal with. And it would have been very nice for DeJuan Jones to be one of those guys. But some of this comes down to where the Browns prioritized investment, which has largely been on the defense. The defense is good, but you would now have an issue on the offensive line.
Yep.
And you've basically taken 3 players. You know, if you go back to Jed Wills, you include James Hudson, but I would really look at it as DeJuan Jones, Luke Whippler, and Zach Zinter. And none of those, Zach Zinter was the earliest pick in the 3rd round. Some of this comes down to the picks you don't have. This is a position group where you want to be able to draft early. I think, and part of the reason I give the Browns somewhat of a pass this year, in addition to the fact that the players they drafted are pretty good, is, to me, once you get past the 1st round, you are wish casting that guys can step in and play in the NFL right away. It is so difficult because of the way college, even going back to high school players are developed on the offensive line for them to step in. They are coming into a completely different sport compared to college. For the most part, so much of college football is catch, step, throw. It's get it out quickly. Offensive linemen are not trained and not accustomed, save for some very specific offenses and some specific programs that do a good job with this, to have to sustain for 3 and 4 seconds with a block. It's so much is get in the way, hold it for a beat or 2, and then the ball's out. That is, a disservice, and it's sort of a product of what, one, it's not easy to train these guys. There aren't that many of them. And the other part is it's a product of your environment. We see it right now. Every defense has freaky athletes. You don't have a bunch of slow guys on defense anymore. You have basically sports cars at every position on the front. So getting 5 guys to be able to handle that is incredibly difficult. So if you're a college coach, you're not paid to develop offensive linemen. You're paid to win football games. So you're gonna find a way to get the job done as efficiently as possible. And as much as coaches want to say, hey, man, I develop players for the draft, that isn't why they're going to keep their jobs. Ask James Franklin. He has a whole lot of draft picks and no job. Now, granted, I would be happily settle for the $20,000 a day he's currently going to be making. But nevertheless, this is the reality in which we exist. So, I look, the Browns made what I think is a preposterously bad bet in terms of not doing a good job of pre-planning the offensive line. Having said that, 3 years of the most horrendous luck at offensive tackle I have ever seen in my life. The fact that we are 6 games in and already 5 tackles deep doesn't come down to the Browns misjudged the situation. They literally have traded for 2 tackles, and KT Levinston is not hurt, but he's not ready. You trade for Cam Robinson. He plays his first game and gets hurt. You get Jack Conklin back. He gets hurt in his first game back. You get Cornelius Lucas, who I think is going to probably have to come back and play this week because he's at least more reliable than KT Leviston. But, I mean, this is a really difficult place to operate in a league that is desperate for offensive line help. And I'm very curious. I would love to know what the conversation that's happening behind closed doors in the NFL league office, because there is a real problem when it comes to offensive linemen. And yes, the Browns are certainly at the forefront of it, but you look across the league and it is horrible. And the best teams in the league right now are the teams that have not only been taking care of the offensive line, but have been able to get lucky in the health department and the offensive line.
Lane, do you have any comments on that particular question? You sort of looked like you did.
It's, Pete said a lot there, and he's correct. You're talking about a team that the tackle's just revolving doors. And Lucas had a foot issue since early in training camp. He's had a foot issue, and it's taking away some of his mobility and agility. And I don't think there's any chance that he doesn't see playing day this week because of everything that's happened. Because Jan Conklin's working through this concussion stuff with him, so we don't know what's going to happen. Probably means he's not going to play. And Cam Robinson, haven't heard a peep, and that's always worrisome when you get to Monday evening and you haven't heard a peep on a guy that was injured. So we look at it. You're going to be going out there and throwing the same things out there, and they had Tevin Jenkins out there at left tackle a little bit. And that was a guy who has some tackle experience. He's been primarily a guard. They have to do something. This isn't like the 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes who lost tackles and slid guards over and replaced the center and picked it up and went on their way and won. This team they don't have guys that could do that. I mean, one of your most promising offensive linemen is Luke Whipper, and, he's basically a center, and he's likely to be the heir apparent. You got Zach Zinter that doesn't even find the active roster game day, at least except once maybe. You have a lot of questions. And at least they're playing Miami this week, so it may not be as bad, but it doesn't mean it's going to be any better.
Your best case scenario for this situation is that if you can get the win against Miami and get through New England, hopefully you win, but get through it, you get the bye week. Is that going to magically fix the situation? Probably not, but that is sort of what they're looking at, and it's ridiculous the luck they've had. They haven't had the same unit start a game twice this season, which makes it incredibly difficult. But it has the potential to submarine a season. It's currently submarining the Ravens season. Their situations on the offensive line. It might kill the Chargers this season. There are a number of teams where the offensive line is just getting hammered, and those are teams that actually did a better job investing at those positions than the Browns did, but they just don't have the guys. So are we going to be in a situation where suddenly Tyree Phillips is going to be having to play? Certainly possible. The trajectory of this season says guys like that are going to be on the field at some point. Ultimately, the answer to the problem is the Browns cannot be in a situation where they cannot run the ball. Whatever that involves, they have to be able to get the ball on the ground and successful to help them stay on schedule and give them some options so they're not sitting in situations where they are 3rd and 10 plus, because this team cannot deal with it. And some of that is penalties. Some of that's the other stuff that they got to clean up. But they just are not a team that can handle and survive in that mode. And way too often against the Steelers, they're in 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14, 3rd and God only knows. And it's just not going to be a winning proposition. And compare the situation against the Minnesota Vikings, winnable football game. Quinshon Judkins gets 100 yards. That has to be part of this until they've come up with better answers to a more successful passing game, more consistent passing game. But at least right now, that is unrealistic at this point. So it starts with Quinshon Judkins has to be effective. Quinshon Judkins has to be good. Here's the problem. The opponent knows that too, so you've got to come up with some solutions.
We go back and look at it, back to the original question about them adding linemen, or why didn't they add a lineman in the draft, this and that. if you don't get a tackle, especially a tackle in the first round or at the very top of the second, your percentage of that player being optimized drastically decreases. And when Simmons went to Kansas City for the price, that took that out of the equation, because that was the one guy who was still sitting there, who was an unquestionable first-round talent playing at a high-end university that was highly productive. When he went out of the question, then you have to look at what they did do then. And they go get a linebacker. The reason they got a linebacker is because your defensive coordinator beat the table for months telling you our defense cannot improve without this kind of player inside the hatches. Just can't, won't, we have nobody. So they addressed it. They did the same thing with Mason Graham, because Schwartz said, I need a defensive tackle who I can develop, who can play inside, stop the run, know his assignment, and develop as a guy who can create pressure. And that's why they made those moves. And then you look at the next pick in Junkins. They had no running back. I don't want to hear the Nick Chubb stuff, because Nick Chubb is a shell of who he was. You needed a guy who was physical and dynamic that you sit here and you look at for the next 8 years saying, that's my guy. He can play this position and do his thing. So that's what they did. So we can question why they didn't draft a lineman. I can see why they didn't, but I also can look and say there was still some talent there, but at what cost? Were you going to use those picks instead of taking this talent that you had here that you needed desperately as well? So it's a big thing. So when you get to free agency, teams sign those tackles if they can play the game at a plus level. They usually don't get out of where they're playing at when they become a free agent, because teams will invest heavily in them just because they can play at a plus level. And it saves a team all the grief of having to try to get somebody else, plug them in there. Do they adapt? Do they play? Do they reach the expectation that they're supposed to have? That's why you ended up with the Cornelius Lucas. One, because the Browns weren't paying. And two, you have to question the availability of something. So now you're going to head into the season. Hopefully you get Cam Robinson. Hopefully he can do something and show something, at least be an average plus. And he's down in game one. And you got nothing on the right side. And your whole offensive line basically can change after this season. So it's like a quagmire. It's a cesspool. You don't know where you can go.
So, like, if you're one of these people who wants to fire everybody, the problem is whoever is here in next spring is going to be doing the exact same thing. So It's not as if a new head coach is going to, the new head coach will go get offensive linemen. Like, whoever is here is going to be getting offensive linemen. It's just a question of what system and who do they want. And we just watched, this is part of the reason that I'm very hesitant to sort of move on. They drafted a guy who no longer fits what they do in Zach Zinter. They changed schemes, went to a heavy gap scheme, and got a Michigan boy who does nothing but block down and gap stuff. And then they went right back to an offense that doesn't suit his talents. And so now you're in a situation where he's potentially going to be an odd man out at some point, unless he gets dramatically improved. I don't believe that his mobility is going to change in a way that's going to allow it. I think Zach Zinter's best chance in Cleveland is, frankly, being Luke Whippler's backup at center. So this is part of the problem. Is as much as I understand the frustration and go, well, I want to blow everything up and this is going to fix it. Whoever it is, like if you fire Kevin Stefanski tomorrow, little is going to change. Suck with a different guy in charge of it. Terry Robisky clapping his way through the next 11 games. You're still going to have to do the hard work after the season and getting that offensive line ready. And the one area where I will sort of defend Andrew Berry is on this point. And this goes back to his, this team's sin with Deshaun Watson. Andrew Berry is right on one key point, and this goes back to his philosophy of being with the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman. You get linemen in the first round or very early in the second round. That's part of why, as much as I've been beating the drum for this team to draft linemen and do this, I think Andrew Berry isn't wrong to say, listen, when I look around the league and where do you get those guys in the first round? And I haven't had the picks to do it. And we can sit here and complain about Mason Graham. Mason Graham's going to be a hell of a football player. So, if you want to take him off the team and get a better, Armand Membu, for example, fine. But Mason Graham's going to be a hell of a player in the same way that Carson Schwarzenegger has the potential to be an all-pro player. Yes, this is one of those situations where the Browns have to show improvement to sort of sustain this thing and convince ownership that they're on the right path. But like, they just needed guys, and to his credit, for all the things wrong at points, I think up until this past year, Andrew Berry has been an average run-of-the-mill GM in the draft. If you look across the league, hits and misses, he's basically dead-ass average. This year is where he's had his opportunity to make his move, and he's nailed it to this point. Now, these guys could go out and suck and get hurt and everything else and ruin it as these things go. It's a collision sport. But if you believe in his ability to sort of do this and you're going to have those picks, you're going to end up in a situation where they're going to get those guys. At that point, it comes, do you have the right guys? Do they fit your system? Are they going to Jed Wills it and decide they get to the pros and decide video games are more fun than football? Those are all things you're going to have to figure out, and you're going to have to get the right guys to coach it and all that stuff. But like, the calculus isn't going to change if different people are here in terms of what has to happen this coming offseason.
Let's we are at an hour into this, but there's one more question I want to make sure that we talk about, and it comes from Jack McCurry. And Jack is expressing something that I've seen a number of times, and I'd like your guys' take on it, which is that offensive line issues aside, hard to put those aside, but let's put them aside. Why hasn't Kevin been willing to evolve or expand his offensive scheme? Now, last year, we brought in an ex-Miami quarterback, Ken Dorsey, to call the offense, or not call the offense so much as alter the offense. So I think Stefanski has shown a willingness to change at various points. But why this perception? Let's start with you, Lane. Why this perception that Kevin Stefanski, has a system, not going to change it come hell or high water?
Well, let's look at that and say, what kind of time frame are we looking at? We're looking at the 2025 season, 6 games in, with all kind of injuries, rookie quarterback, rookie running back, rookie tight end, 5 receivers who can't catch the ball. I'm not sure you can evolve when you can't do the base. And I think that's a big problem. That they can't play their base offense, basic fundamental football. They have issues there. They have issues getting lined up. They have issues being on time. It's hard to evolve anything because you're not seeing the playbook. You're not seeing everything that's in that playbook on what this offense is supposed to be if things are working. And that's where you come back and you talk about the line, and you talk about coaching, talk about player accountability. You have to have these things at least working to evolve. You can't evolve if you can't get back on your back foot and throw the ball, or you can't run the football. Teams are now going to look at the Cleveland Browns offense, and they're going to look at what Pittsburgh did, and you're going to start seeing a little bit more of that until the Browns can prove that they can beat it. And if that's how this game, the game in the NFL, evolves. And that's what you're going to get. We saw a huge change in 2024 with Ken Dorsey, changed the offense, because the savior Deshaun Watson was going to be your quarterback, and get him back into something that he was more familiar with, where he could get back there and just throw the football over the field. We've seen how well that worked.
Right.
And did they try to evolve upon that offense? Yes. They tried to incorporate some of what Stefanski did, and they tried to do it so it was more in tune with what Watson did in Houston under O'Brien. And everything was anti-Cleveland Brown football. And Deshaun Watson wasn't happy, wasn't capable to play in Stefanski's offense when he got here. He was behind a big part of the reason why Alex Van Pelt and everything else of that bullshit that happened, where they completely changed staff, changed how they played the game. That was all because of the quarterback that they acquired. And now this is a huge evolving from that and trying to put all the pieces back together today. And now you can't evolve because you can't execute. And it's really as simple as that. You can't execute.
You see the attempt to bring different looks and different schemes and everything else, and the so-called evolution in the script. Every game they have stuff that they pull out. where they're able to rehearse, where it looks pretty good, or they miss it. First, like again, they get an empty, misses David Njoku down, running that post. That's the scheme is there. Everything's going the way it should be in terms of the play call. It's open. You got exactly what you wanted. You don't make the play. So
simple,
at that
fundamental football.
So at that point, you sit there and go, well, we can't execute this. So when you can't trust your guys to do what's called for them, or again, you don't have enough plays, you start shrinking. You shrink what you can do because you have to trust your guys to be able to execute it. And a lot of this, as much as it's not going to be an excuse relative to how this regime is going to be evaluated by ownership, they don't have the talent to just do a whole bunch of stuff. They don't have the talent. They don't have the blocking to protect long enough to run some of these different schemes they want to do. Or we've seen them try to be creative in the screen game, and either it's been a near miss or teams have snuffed it out. You see all kinds of stuff they want to do. Look, I'll take it from my standpoint. In coaching at the level I do, we look really smart players who run up and down the field and scored 50 points and all this stuff. Yep. We don't look as smart when we scored 20. That is some element of that. Like, it's really difficult to coach your way out of getting your ass kicked up front for 4 quarters. There's only so much you can do in those situations. So it's naturally going to shrink down what you can do. It's going to shrink down how creative you can be. It's going to shrink down all the things when you can't count on your guys to have their eyes on the right place or to line up correctly, or the down and distance doesn't allow you to take that chance, or everything else. This is where I disagree on certain elements. Kevin Stefanski deserves criticism for being overly conservative at the end of the Minnesota Vikings game. Those are things where I'm more than happy to say he's wrong. And there's always play calls. Like, I hate running empty with young quarterbacks. I hate it. And nevertheless, the play was wide open. They should have had a big play to Njoku to open up the game. But overall, I never question Kevin Stefanski's ability to scheme up plays, because inevitably we will get people who are super frustrated during the game. And then I will look back and see during the tape that Kevin Stefanski got exactly what he wanted, and they just didn't do it and left a touchdown on the field. And this happens over and over and over again. And this is one of those things where, coaches can be 100% right, have the best game plan in the world, have something that should be hung up in the football equivalent of the Louvre. But if your players don't execute it, you're still going to look like a bumbling idiot when you come out on the losing end.
You can see that in each of the 6 games thus far this season. Those opportunities, multiple opportunities in each game, were left on the field.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, how you want to look at it, those opportunities were all sitting out there on the field. That changes the complexion of a game. One play like that can completely change the complexion of a game. And they either fail to capitalize, don't see it, don't have time. And like a screen pass where you need 5 to 7 things work in unison to make a screen pass perfect.
Now, the one thing sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
Well, I would just say the one thing I would say, if you're saying I'm looking for hope, I continue to believe this, and I think the people in the building believe this, particularly the coaching staff. If they can just get that spark, if they can just get it going a little bit, I won't say the floodgates will open. I will just say when you turn the faucet on, water will come out. That's the difference in this thing. And I look at Jerry Jeudy as the barometer for that in a large way. It's frustrating watching him go through the struggles he's going through, some of which are entirely self-inflicted. But when he's right, it opens everything up. They create explosive plays. And to a T, every time he has an explosive play, the Browns score points. If they can get that going, if they can find some level of comfort, if they can get some confidence going with this group, it's going to open things up. We've seen a little bit of it with the running game. We've seen it when Quinshon Judkins is feeling himself, going to the point where he's acting like a psychopath, getting in guys' faces on the other team because he knows he's kicking their ass. That is where you can start to see it. They need to get something going in the passing game that can amount to that. And we've seen flashes. We've seen drives. Unfortunately, against the Steelers, they were all 2 minutes and not enough time to sort of finish them. There's flash. They just need to get that thing going. They need to find the confidence and get some consistency. Hopefully, against a team as bad as the Miami Dolphins, we can start to see this thing pay off and start to get a rhythm and get some confidence going for this group.
All right. Well, with that in mind, one final question from the Black Star Media Group to you, Lane. Are they going to beat the Dolphins or not?
They sure the hell better, but as bad as we can look and say Miami isn't a good team or a bad team, they still have the ability to move the football and score a little bit. So, we're going to break a 100-year thing here, and the Browns are going to score 20 points. I don't know about that.
What about you, Pete? You think they got a good shot?
They better. It's at home. Their defense is better. Still continues to be better at home for whatever reason. Tyson Campbell with a full week, more accustomed to be able to form a plan around him. But yes, I do think the offense will go going because Miami's awful, and I think the Miami Dolphins hate each other as much as they might hate any opponent they're facing at this point. And I think that is going to, if the Browns, to this point, I know people will pick on specific comments and frustration and all that stuff. The Browns seemingly have stuck together a hell of a lot better than that team, and I think it will pay off with a win. If for no other reason, it's the Brownsiest outcome ever in that they beat the team that they're supposed, the team this bad, and we don't get a definitive answer on where this team really is.
If they lose this game Sunday, it's going to be the most unbearable situation in Cleveland. Yeah. And it's just going to be, you thought it's ugly now, or you thought it was ugly with Hugh Jackson. You wait, if they lose this game Sunday, we're just how bad it's really going to be.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, batten down the hatches. Let's hope for a positive outcome against Miami. I think that they will break that 17-point barrier. I truly believe it. I have no reason to believe it, but I just believe it.
So that means you're thinking special teams is going to make a play or something like that to get on the
defensive return for an interception return, something like
complimentary football, baby.
Yeah, we need the defensive special teams to score. All right, so that's it for Gang of Three for another Monday night. It's been an exciting show. I refrained from explaining to Mega Man James what carpetbaggers actually means. And I hold myself, I'm very proud of that I did not go on a rant about that. But thank you to everyone else in the chat for joining us tonight, for offering your opinions, whether you agree with us or not. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again next Monday night, hopefully after a win, with another edition of Gang of Three. Good night, everybody.